Hi, I'm Asia White, and this is my persuasive speech. What I chose to do my persuasive speech on is why verbal abuse is more destructive than physical abuse. If a woman approached you and said she was a victim of abuse, and you saw no scars, no bruises of any kind, would you believe her? Abuse is more than black eyes and broken bones. There's abuse that cannot be seen, and with that is verbal abuse. Verbal abuse almost has an advantage when it comes to going unnoticed. Verbal abuse is recognized as a social issue, but not an immediate threat. The CDC has a list of reported cases of both verbal and physical abuse. To come up with the statistic that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men are victims of physical abuse alone. But they have the statistic of 1 in 10 women being victims of verbal abuse, when there's estimated that nearly over 50% of victims are victims of verbal abuse. So by it being unnoticed, and being less reported, or the reports not being taken down, it's not getting as much action when a victim may or may not call out upon it. Some signs of verbal abuse that victims may go through, you have gaslighting, which is a type of manipulation that abusers may use to just make the victims question themselves. And sometimes they'll hear a lot of things like, "What? I didn't say that. You're crazy." And that just automatically makes a person always second guess themselves. Abusers like to maintain certain amount of control over what they may do, over what they may say, just to stand over another person. There's also blackmail or threats. A lot of abusers will threaten to do harm to themselves or someone close to the victim if they said anything back, or if they did anything that they may think is wrong, or if they decided to leave, which keeps them there in that situation. There's also cases of indirect violence where it's never physically towards you, but it's always the threat that it is. So they may punch a wall or throw things or knock things over, then a victim may have in their head that they will be next. But still, it is not spoken on. So just like, unlike physical abuse, it is not done much about when it's heard of or when it's complained about. It's more brushed off as a joke. A lot of verbal abuse is taken as a joke because it'll be um, mean comments or name calling, and a lot of people will take it out of context and overuse the term, which makes the term not as effective. So they'll write it off as maybe just teasing or bullying. Verbal abuse can actually affect you physically. So when people say that words hurt, words can physically hurt you. Verbal abuse and any causes a lot of stress, and stress itself it has been led to cause type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, even most cancers. There have been cases where victims will have pains in their stomachs and nausea and ulcers that had no medicine to cure it, that had no treatment until they left their abusers. But then there are also victims that come back and none of these problems are ever solved, and they live with them for the rest of their lives, like migraines, back to the ulcers again. And then also, these are a lot of things that can eventually just still lead to death. So it can actually, so the amount of stress that it causes can actually kill you. Where physical abuse, you also have damage that can also kill you. But if you do not, most of your physical pain will heal over time eventually. Um, there are mental factors that happen with both verbal and physical abuse victims can develop PTSD. I do understand that, but you also have the loss of trust when it comes to anyone's words because they've become victims of so much manipulation. Anyone's words are untrustworthy. They have trouble forming decisions. They have trouble concentrating or coming up with their, like, making up their own mind and forming conclusions for certain things. Um, Most victims of verbal abuse, whether they're man, woman, or child, grow up or start to develop alcohol and substance abuse issues as well. And there's another physical effect. It's called memory gap disorders, which is kind of a way of your body to erase those memories that hurt you the most, or erase those memories that are just too much to handle. But it can also affect your short term and your long term memories as well. Um, Frankly, I will say that both physical and verbal abuse are bad, but because verbal abuse is treated as a joke or is not reported as often, it does not get the treatment, or it does not get the victims do not get the justice that they may be entitled to just because of where it stands on anyone's list of priorities. The physical effects you may have to live with for the entirety of your life, whereas physical abuse you will heal. Verbal abuse, whether it the stress leads to cancer or leads to diabetes, you're with that for the rest of your life. Um, the depression it causes, the PTSD it causes, the memory gap disorders it causes, are actually changes in your brain chemistry. So even after you leave, your brain chemistry is just changed forever. So I do also think that that is a big factor of why it can be more destructive than physical abuse. Um, I would also like to add that if you or anyone you know is a victim of verbal or physical abuse of any kind, that you just call help, seek help. There are shelters everywhere. There are numbers everywhere. There is the major one, it's the National Crisis Hotline. The number is 1-800-799-SAFE. So it's 1-800-799-7233. And you all have a wonderful evening. Again, my name is Asia White.